Hello to everyone. My name is D. Sandeep. I am working as an assistant professor in the Department of Information Technology of MLR Institute of Technology, Hyderabad. So previously I discussed about what? Functions as well as lambda, that is anonymous functions. That anonymous functions we discussed about what? The functions without having name, and also we discussed about that advanced functions, that is filter functions and map function. So filter function is used to filter the elements. That means whenever these filter functions returns true, that element will be filtered, and that if the function returns false, then that element is not filtered. So that is about what? Filter function. Then we have the map function. So the map function is used to manipulate that elements. So anyway, we discussed that previously. Now today we are going to discuss about that OOPS concepts. So here, first one here is procedure oriented programming language we are going to discuss, and object oriented programming language, differences between procedure oriented and object oriented programming language, then Python OOPS concepts. First here, see what is the procedure oriented programming language. What is the procedure oriented programming language? In procedural oriented programming language, for example, there is a task. Now the task is divided into, for example, this is the task, and this task is divided into subtask, and these subtask is considered as a functions, or we can say routines, or we can say subroutines, or we can say procedures. That is called procedural oriented programming language. For example, if you take that there is a task, that is we have to develop that WhatsApp application. Now the task, that WhatsApp application is considered as a task. Now the task is divided into subtask. For example, here the subtask is, one is call, and second one is chart, and third one is status. So this is the subtask. Just consider this one, because of in our WhatsApp application this is the main three things, right? So that is the thing. Now these subtasks are considered as a functions, or routines, or procedures, or subroutines. So that means we are going to develop that application using functions. So that is called procedural oriented programming language, and sometimes it is also known as functional oriented programming language. If you take that examples, so that is some programming examples are there. That is Fortran is one thing, Algol, COBOL, Basic, Pascal, and C. So C is one of the procedure or functional oriented programming language. That's why in C we have the main function and print functions, scanf functions, like that one we have, right? So everything is there function. Through that functions only we are going to define, and we have that void return type functions are there in C. So everything we have to implement using functions. Then we can achieve the task. That is in procedural oriented programming language. Next, coming to this one, object oriented programming language. What is this object oriented programming language? In object oriented programming language, a task is divided into subtasks, and these subtasks considered as classes. In object oriented programming language, a task is divided into subtasks, and these subtasks is considered as classes. For example, if you take the same thing, the same task, that is WhatsApp application development task. Now in that one, what we have mainly three, that subtask is call, chart, and then status. Now these subtasks are going to consider as class. So that means in object oriented programming language we are going to consider the subtasks as classes, and in each and every class, of course, we are going to create any number of objects. Anyway, some examples are there, that is Java, C++, C#, Python, PHP, JavaScript, Ruby, Perl, Objective-C, Dart, Swift, Scala. So these are the object oriented programming languages. Okay, next we'll see the differences between the procedure oriented programming language and object oriented programming language, right? In procedure oriented programming language, the program is divided into small parts. That means subtask, and that subtask we are going to consider as functions. So just before we discuss that one. Next, in object oriented programming, the program is divided into small parts and it is considered as a objects. That means the subtask and the subtask considered as a class. In that class we are going to create what? Objects. In that class we are going to create what? Objects, right? Or we can say sometimes instances. Next, procedural programming, that is that C programming, whatever that procedure oriented programming languages are going to follow top down approach. In object oriented programming follows bottom up approach. Why? For example, if you take the Java programming language are going to start the execution from the main method. So like that one we can say object oriented programming language follows what? Bottom up approach. Without main method we cannot start the execution, right? Next, in procedure oriented programming language we don't have any access specifiers. Access specifiers is what? That represents the level of permissions. That means the level of access permissions to the variables or to the methods or to the anything, to the functions or anything. So that is concept. That concept is don't have in the procedure oriented programming language. So here that access specifiers we can say public, private, protected and default. Anyway, that concept is available in object oriented programming language through this public, private, protected and default access specifiers are there. So once again I will tell you that access specifiers represents what? The level of access, or we can say the level of accessible to the variables or whatever the things are there. Functions, objects, like that one. Methods, classes, like, so that is the thing. Next, procedure oriented programming language, we can add new data. That means if you are going to adding the new data and the data it is, but adding functions is not easy. But here adding new data and functions is easy, right? So that is the one important thing. Next, procedure oriented programming language does not have any proper way of hiding data, so it is less secure. Yes, this is very important point. So in procedure oriented programming languages we are going to get some less secure because of, for why means, for example, if you take here, there are 4 functions in a program: F1 function, F2 function, F3 function and F4 function, and these 4 functions are going to access one global memory. That means that F1 function are going to store the data into this, F2 function are going to store this data into this global memory, F3 function, F4 function, all 4 functions are going to store the data in the global memory, and all 4 functions are going to access the data from this global memory. At that time there is a chance that function 1 may be access that F2 data, that is function 2 data, or the function 2 data may be access remaining 3 functions data. So like that one, in procedure oriented programming languages we don't have that much secure to the data, but in object oriented programming language we have the secure, because of there is a data hiding concept, as well as we have for every object, for everything we are going to create an object. For every methods, or we can say for everything we are going to create an object. For example, this is M1 method, M2 method, M3 method and M4 method, right? So for each and every methods we can consider what? One individual memory. That means for M1 method is one object, for M2 method is another object, M3 method one object, M4 method one object. So individual objects will be there in object oriented programming language. So that's why in object oriented programming language security is more to the data. Next, in procedure oriented programming language overloading is not possible. Overloading is nothing but what? For example, if you take the function method overloading in the Java concepts, see, but in overloading possible in object oriented. What is this overloading means? So methods having same name same name but with a different type of parameters or with a different number of parameters. Okay, now with a different type of parameters or with a different number of parameters. Now these two is called method overloading. So that overloading, method overloading and operator overloading is also there. So that overloading concept is not possible in procedure oriented, but it is possible in object oriented. Next, in procedure oriented programming language, there is no concept of data hiding and inheritance. So inheritance means what? Accessing the properties and behavior from existing function by the current by the existing from the existing class. Okay, that means accessing the properties and behavior from where? From parent class by the child class. That is called inheritance concept. That is not available in procedure oriented, but it is available, that is available in object oriented programming language. In procedure oriented programming, programming, the function is more important the data. Yes, in procedure oriented programming language, they are going to give the priority to the functions but not the data. Just we see function for all the functions having one global memory. That means here they are going to, according to this one, they are going to give the priority to the functions but not for the data. But not here in object oriented programming language, they are going to give the priority to the data. They are going to give the data more than the methods or we can say functions. That is the thing. Next, procedure oriented programming language is based on the unreal world. But coming to this one, object oriented programming is based on the real world. Next, procedure programming is used for designing medium sized programs. That means we cannot develop that much complex level applications. But object oriented programming language, we can design large size as well as complex level applications. So that is the one important point also. Next, one more important point here is procedure programming uses the concept of procedure abstraction, but it is data abstraction. So compared with these procedure abstraction, data abstraction is the very advantage, right? Next, code reusability. So code reusability is absent in the procedure programming languages, right? Code reusability means without rewriting once again, just we are going to reuse the existing or existed code. So that is the code reusability. But this concept is available in object oriented programming language. Of course, we seen this example: C, Fortran, Pascal, Basic, and so on, etc. And this one also C++, Java, Python, C#, and so on. Some examples already we seen, but here we given the differences, right? So this is about what? Differences between procedure oriented and object oriented programming language. Now the OOPS concepts. So as we know that OOPS is what? So that represents the code using the objects. That represents the code using the objects and classes to represent the real world entities and their behavior. So that is the main purpose of the OOPS concept. So what is the main purpose, or what we can say, what is the OOPS concepts means? The OOPS concepts are going to organize the code by using objects and classes to represent the real world entities or real world behavior. So that's why here these two things are main components. These two things are main components. Of course, these objects are going to represent what? Attributes as well as methods. Okay, na? For every object having attributes and then methods. Anyway, these are the OOPS concept, that is class, objects, polymorphism, encapsulation, inheritance, and data abstraction. So these are the important concepts or important OOPS concepts in Python, right? So we'll discuss one by one anyway. That is, what is the class, what is the object, and what is the polymorphism, what is the encapsulation, what is the inheritance, what is the data abstraction, right? Next, finally, so object oriented programming is a fundamental concept in Python. Yes, it is fundamental, but it is very important concept in Python because of to develop that modular, maintainable, and large scalable applications. or complex level applications. Now Python fully supports that object oriented concepts. Yes, fully supports means, some programming languages did not support that inheritance concept. Like that one, they are going to, like that one, some programming languages are not going to support full concepts of OOPS concepts or full OOPS concepts. So that's why, but in this Python supports fully object oriented concepts, that is class, objects, inheritance, encapsulation, polymorphism. So these are the what about object oriented programming concepts and statements, right? So in next class we'll discuss about that, what is a class in Python and what is the object in Python, and whatever that variables, whatever the things are there, we'll discuss, right? Thank you.